Hello and good morning. Good Tuesday morning. Here we are the week after Thanksgiving. If you're like me, you tried to keep the weight gain under 2.5 pounds, which I managed to do this year. If you know me a little bit, me and pumpkin pie are like best friends. I can go to Costco and eat that entire pie all by myself. Yeah, I take the crust off, but that pie with some whipped cream on it, I'm done. Well, again, if you're here live, go ahead and type live down below, like, comment, share. This whole game is about you. It's about giving you what you need so that you can continue to grow your business. Now, some of you may know this and some of you may not, but prior to being a consultant and a contractor, I was a police officer in Mesa, Arizona, which is a suburb of Phoenix. In fact, it's one of the 8 largest cities in the U.S., and I had a great time, learned a lot, made a lot of dumb mistakes, and grew a lot during that time. But during that experience, I learned some things when it comes to building a team. Now, why am I telling you that? You're like, what does police work have to do with contracting? Well, you'd be surprised. There's a whole lot that comes across from both sides, right? And so what I want to share with you guys today are the SWAT strategies for peak performance. In other words, how do we take the strategies that I deployed for so many years working on the SWAT team and working undercover and transition it over into your contracting business? So let's get into it. There's 3 different things that I learned inside of being a SWAT team member, right? And these 3 things are not the only things that I learned, but I should say more specifically when it comes to building and working with a team, okay? The first thing is something that I like to call the gate, right? Now, why do I call it the gate? I call it the gate because, unfortunately, most of us don't have one. Now, what is the gate, right? Think about a gate on a property. What is the purpose of the gate? It's to keep things out that you don't want, and it's to keep things in that you do want, right? That's the purpose of the gate. Might be your kid sometimes. That was a good one. Might be your kid sometimes, might be the animals. You might live in a rural area, might live in a not so great area, right? But the gate's purpose is to keep things out that you don't want and keep things in that you do. Now, when it comes to a SWAT team, what does a gate have to do with being a member of the SWAT team? Well, I will tell you that you couldn't just apply or write your name on a list or show up and expect to be a member of the SWAT team. In fact, the training program prior to the test is 8 to 12 months. That's how much training I had to do prior to even testing to be a member of the SWAT team. Now, why is that? Well, because they function at such a high level and their expectation is so high that they don't want to let somebody in that's going to fail quickly. Because failure does a couple of things. 1, it handicaps the team. But 2, failure can also expose someone else on the team to something dangerous, like getting shot, for example, right? So when we're talking about the gate, when it comes to a contracting business, what are we talking about? We're talking about your hiring process. Most of you don't have a hiring process. Most of you need to hire someone, but you don't have a hiring process, which means at the end of the day, it's come who may. In fact, if you go to Target or you go to Walmart or you go to McDonald's, you're going to see that they have interviews on site. In other words, write your name down, fill out this quick application, and we're going to interview you right away because that's their standard. It is the lowest of the low. We're going to pay you the minimum that we can pay you. We're going to automate as much of your job as we can. We just want you to show up because we need warm bodies, right? Now, let me ask you, in your hiring process up until this point, have you been functioning more like a SWAT team or more like Walmart? Or are you somewhere in between, right? In other words, you need to have a hiring process. What's the importance of the hiring process when it comes to contracting? Well, think about this. Why are you hiring someone? You're hiring someone for 2 reasons. Number 1 is to get more done so you can get paid more. Number 2 is to remove yourself from having to do the work yourself. right? Dual purpose. And so let me ask you, if you hire the first warm body that shows up, what's the likelihood that those two things are going to happen? And you know exactly what I'm talking about, because you hire a guy, you're like, hey, go help that guy over there put these roof trusses on, or go help that guy dig this trench for landscaping, or go help that guy with the wiring, and he either takes off for lunch and doesn't come back, or makes it a week, or burns the house down and you have to fire him anyway. So the purpose of having a gate is to help you keep the things out that you don't want, the bad employees, but then ultimately help keep the good ones in as well. Okay? Now, I talked about that first part, but when we talk about keeping the good ones in, keeping the good things in, when we were part of the SWAT team, we functioned like an elite team. In other words, we did everything together. We trained together. We ate together. Our families would hang out together after work and on the weekends. We would go to parties together. All of these things happened together, right? I knew the people on my team at a very intimate level, which allowed me to function at a higher level. Why? Because it wasn't just another guy, right? It was a person that I really cared about. And so I wanted to perform at a higher level for the person that I was working with. As a contractor, guess what? It's the same thing. Your employees can be employees, 100%. And then there are businesses that run that way. Or your employees can be teammates. They can be family. And you treat them differently. That doesn't mean you lower the expectations. Notice I didn't say that. It means you treat them differently, right? You actually raise the bar, raise the expectation. And we can go into details on some different things to do that. But I just want to open up your mind to that concept first, okay? So again, SWAT strategies for peak performance. Number one is the gate. You need a gate to keep things out or people out that shouldn't be there, and then ultimately to keep the ones in that you want there. The second thing when it comes to strategies for peak performance, when it comes to the SWAT team, the first one is the gate. The second one is the training. Okay? Now, what do I mean by the training? Well, let me ask you first, do you have a training program inside of your business? And you probably are going to respond with something like, yeah, but I'm doing roofing, or we're just doing framing, or it's just electrical work or landscaping or whatever it is. We don't have a training program. Or worse, you're going to tell yourself the lie that we don't need a training program. That's a bad one. Truth is, you do. Why? Okay, what does a training program allow you to do? Number one is what we call uniformity. There's a certain way that you want things done, right? I work with an electrician that likes things to happen a certain way. In other words, they tie off all of their connections a certain way, right? And so it isn't anything bad. It's actually a good thing. You want your standard of service to be at a certain level, right? You don't want somebody, say you have a window washing company, you don't want somebody washing windows one way and getting the windows really clean, and somebody washing them another way and they're always streaky and dirty, right? What does that mean for you? That means someone, probably you, is going to have to go back and fix it, fix the problem. So it allows us to have uniformity. Number two, it allows us to weed out the bad ones. So say you have a gate, you have a really high standard, you have a really good hiring process, you bring somebody in that you believe, based off of training experience and their interview, you believe that they're going to be a long-term member of your contracting business, right? A member of the family, if you will. And so you bring this person in, you start training them. What's going to happen inside of your training process that you're going to discover really quickly? Number one, it's whether the person can do the job that you hired them to do or not, right? And so the training process allows us to see that. Because inside of the training process, three things are going to happen, okay? Number one, you're going to have a watch me phase, which is literally the person watches you do whatever it is that you want them to do. Now, this could last a couple hours, it could last a couple days, it could last a couple weeks, maybe even a couple months, depending on the complexity of the job. But ultimately, there's a watch me phase. Look, I don't want you to push buttons, touch anything. I just want you to watch me do it because I want you to get comfortable and understand what I'm doing. Ask questions, right? I may quiz you along the way to make sure that you understand it, but ultimately, you are watching me, okay? The second phase is do it with me. That's exactly what it sounds like. Now this person is an apprentice and they are working with you. Whether you're putting up rain gutters, installing windows, putting sod down for landscaping, they are working with you. They should have watched you, and between their experience and watching you, have a good understanding of what needs to be done and how it needs to be done, right? With minor corrections, right? The do it with me phase. And then comes phase 3. Now you do it. Which is exactly what it sounds like. You step back or your trainer steps back, and now the person should be able to do it on their own with minor corrections. If the person that you hired can't make it through your training process, should you keep them around? Well, the answer is no. Yet most of you do. Most of you keep the bad people around. Weed out the bad people. Trust me, long term, it's going to save you headaches, it's going to save you time, and ultimately it's going to save you money. So come up with a training process that follows this framework. Watch me, do it with me, now you do it. Fair? Now the third piece, or the third strategy, if you will, for peak for performance when it comes to the SWAT team, but ultimately now we're talking about your contracting business, is a concept I call trust but verify. Now, when we were executing a search warrant on a residence, either for narcotics or searching for a particular individual or whatnot, regardless of whether we found what we were looking for or not, we would always perform something called a double check, right? And all the double check is that I initially was in charge of room number 1 and making sure that I cleared everything inside of room number 1 or searched everything inside of room number 1. Well, when we double checked, I would actually go to another room and perform the same search. It didn't mean that I was bad. It didn't mean that they didn't trust me. It meant that was part of our process to make sure that we didn't miss anything. And it's the same thing inside of your contracting business. You need to trust but verify. It doesn't matter if it's a manual laborer and his job is to clean up the trash on the job site. If you have a standard of having a clean job site at the end of the day, somebody should be verifying that the guy who said he was going to do it actually did it, right? It could be more complicated. It could be somebody who's running your books. Guess what? Most contractors hate books. Totally get it. But you should have a way to verify that the person doing your books is actually doing them the way that they need to be done. And they're documenting the information that you need so you can make the decisions that you need to make. It doesn't matter if you have a project manager. It doesn't matter if you have an installer, right? This applies across the board. Trust but verify. If you can get past the ego, which says, oh, you don't trust me, right? And understand that it's actually about quality and making sure that we don't miss anything, the standard that you have inside of your business will rise. Now, to go over this again, these 3 strategies that I gleaned from my time on the SWAT team, right? Peak performance. Number 1 is you need a gate. Purpose of the gate, keep things out that you don't want in and keep the things in that you don't want to leave. And most importantly, right now, we're talking about employees. And inside of the SWAT team, as I was mentioning, we had a very vigorous gate, 8 to 12 month training process prior to the test, which was a multi-day and multi-scenario process. Okay, made sure that only the good, the really good, the elite were making it inside of that gate. The second piece is, you guessed it, the training. So now we're looking at the training and saying, how am I making sure that the person that I hired is actually capable of doing things the way I want it done, right? And in the manner that I want it done, right? So again, you need a training process that has phase 1, watch me do it. Phase 2, do it with me. Phase 3, now you do it. And the last piece being trust but verify. You need to implement a way of double checking the work that's getting done to make sure that it's always done to your standard. All right, if you have any questions, you guys know the drill. Drop them down below. Love to hear your comments inside of this. Like it, share it with your contracting buddies. Ultimately, though, this is for you and to help you continue to build your contracting business. All right, you know what time it is. It's time for you to get after it. 3, 2, 1, off you go.